Hello again, YouTube. Fred Romano, you asked if I would do a soldering video. So, first things you're going to need to solder is, of course, a quality soldering iron. I like this one because it gives me heat on demand. When I pull the trigger, I can give half heat or full heat. It gets plenty hot enough for any solder I've come across. You're going to need a sponge to clean the tips, some flux, and of course some soldering wire itself. Okay, this is the wire that came off the charger of my FC40. Now what I was doing was I was holding the wires right here and pulling the battery off. And this eventually ripped off. Well, I had already soldered this, but I ripped it off again so I could show you how I would go about fixing something like this. First, I know it's weird I'm using fingernail clippers, if these even work. But you want to cut off the old wire completely. Get rid of all the old wire. Until you're down to that. Clean wire. And clean this up as well as you can. There's copper braid that you can get that you put on top of it, and then you put the heat to it, and capillary action will actually pull the solder off the joint and into the copper braid, but I can't find mine, so I just figured I'd show you how to do it without any of that stuff. Now we are going to need to expose some of the wire. So just cut through the shielding some until you have that, and then twist it and do the same thing for both.
I've never been a big fan of the sunset. That's pretty great. Thank God there was a shooting at that walk.
So you have two bare wires now. And the first thing you are going to want to do is take your flux, take both tips, and dip it down in the flux. Just the metal part. Now you are going to want to tin the tip of the gun or your soldering iron. What you do is, in my case, I hold the trigger until it gets hot, and then I take some of the solder and melt it onto the tip, because melted solder helps conduct the heat between joints a lot better than solder that's already fixed. Now this is my negative side, so of course that would be a black wire, so that would be this one. I would take the wire. I already have some solder on there. We're going to try to use that solder that's already on there, and then add some more once we get it put in place. Okay, that's one. One joint is already reconnected now. And now the second one, you have to completely flip it over. It's always good to use heat sinks, which you put on the wire first, and then after you solder, you slide it down over the joint and just put some heat to it, and it will tighten down over the joint and almost make it watertight. but I'm just doing this to show it. Sorry, I have a little extra solder touching between the two contacts, and you definitely don't want that because that will short out a battery and either kill a battery or kill a charger. And if you want to fly your drone, you don't want either one of those. Okay, now with the red one, the red is positive. We do the same thing. We take the wire, and we do not heat the wire itself. We heat the joint because that's where the solder is. It will in turn heat the wire. Solder will move up the wire in a capillary action. And now you have both joints soldered. They're not the prettiest, I will admit, because I had extra solder. If these were already very clean joints, what you could do is you could clip a little piece of solder off and drop it down in there, and then put the wire down in there, and then just put some heat to the joint, and it will just automatically solder it. But always make sure to coat the wire in flux first, because what the flux does is it removes any contaminants between the joint. A lot of people say, well, I've heard people say solder does not conduct electricity. Yes, it does. It is basically mostly lead. It's very soft, very easy to move, bend around, and that's why this is rosin core solder, which is what you use for electronics. There's also what's called acid core, and that's used for in the automotive industry for repairing radiators, things like that. But that's how you solder, and when you're done, make sure to clean off the tip. This is a wet sponge, by the way. Clean off the tip of your soldering iron, and then re-tin it with some solder, because it will protect it from impurities. See? I left some solder on there to keep it clean and for when the next time I use it. And then, like with this, you would definitely want to put some heat shrink on it so the two contacts don't touch and you don't short out your charger, because that's not a good charger. It's not digital. I bought a Dynamite. It's a faster charger, but I actually bought a Dynamite Profit Sport LiPo, and instead of having to connect both this and the balance leads, all I have to do is connect the balance leads, and when charging the battery, it charges it a lot better, because with the original charger, it charges it through the actual output, but watches the cell's balance, so it's a little slow. This way, it actually sends a current of electricity to each different cell in the battery. So each cell is getting charged, and the cool thing about it is by pressing this, you can go from half an amp to 1 amp to 1.5 to 2 to 2.5 to 3. You can turn it on and off, so it's not a red or a green, and as soon as the battery's done, you have to take it off. You can leave the battery plugged in, but I don't suggest that. As soon as it's done, take it off and unplug it. Keep it slight, because this is basically a transformer. It reduces the 120 volts down to 11.1 at a certain amperage. Well, actually a little higher than 11.1, because standard Phantom LiPo battery goes to about 12. Why am I putting that there? Standard LiPo battery goes to about 12.6 volts, and it's safe down minimum, absolute minimum 3. But if you really want to keep it safe, keep it above 3.5, because one thing you will notice if you go below about 3.2 or 3 is you'll start seeing the battery actually start swelling, and That's because the chemical reaction is getting so hot and getting so intense that the casing that they put it in can no longer hold, and sometimes they will literally explode. So if you have a battery like that, if you're going to keep it in a metal container, because if it explodes, you're going to have a nice little explosion. Because, I mean, people don't know this, but lithium LiPo batteries are basically pure lithium that are put on a sheet of aluminum, and then many layers are pressed together. Lithium is a substance that when charged, it holds the charge. I don't know exactly how, but it's an element that actually holds the charge until you decide to take it away. And that's how LiPo batteries, that's how batteries have gotten so small, because we've been able to make them, sandwich them so thin, and then make separate cells. Like the Tesla runs on 84 separate cells. The Phantom runs on 3. So that gives you sort of an idea of what a car runs on compared to what we play with in the sky. Okay, I hope this helped whoever needed to show solder. I know that is not this. That is a very shitty looking solder. I know that, but guess what? It still holds. And you could put heat shrink down on that or tape it, and it would work. It's just there was already solder on there, and I didn't have a extraction pump or some copper braid to suck it out. But remember, all you need is soldering iron, flux, solder, and paper, something wet to clean off the tip. Peace.